right? Watch what you wish for. Look at the peanut gallery in the back applauding. Thank you. My name is Keith, and I'm an alcoholic. I know, I can't believe I'm finally doing this. My sobriety date is January 27th of 2003. So I've been coming here kind of off and on throughout the years, and finally up here. So that's pretty cool. So I'll start out at the beginning, which is a very fine place to start. I came into this world as Keith Andrew Burtwell. I'll break my anonymity a little bit. At Beth Israel Hospital in Boston, Massachusetts on April 19th, 1964. So you can do the math. I just had a birthday. My parents were Archie and Mary Lou. Caught a lot of flack from my parents' names growing up as a kid, as you might imagine. Jughead jokes and stuff like that. And so I grew up in a town called Melrose, which was about 10 miles north of Boston. Nice little suburb, bedroom community. And as a kid, I would just describe myself as being very creative. At 4 years of age, I sat down at the piano and started banging out. And it was I think it was around the time that like Jesus Christ Superstar was out, the musical, and I sat down and played da 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 da, and I could play the whole song by ear. And so the first thing I remember is kind of being good at playing the piano. And so my parents signed me up for piano lessons. I took piano from a woman 2 doors up the street, Mrs. Canzanello, and I got to apologize too. I get a little caught in these thought tributaries. I'll get sucked into a name or a place, but it's just I want to give you all the details. So, but one of the first things. So as a kid, I loved playing piano, and I started that at a young age, and then. I also was obsessed with the radio. I remember having this little, date myself, Panasonic was kind of a brand of radio at the time, and they had this thing called the two-loop radio. And it was this kind of like, looked like a bagel, but it was lopsided, this bagel. And I was kind of a little dork, and I put it on my bike, and I'd ride around with the two-loop radio playing WRKO and all the top 40 songs on my bike. Share that little thing. And so radio I was just obsessed with, and I'd call the radio station and request songs all the time, and I try and win contests and all that. And so I eventually got a tape recorder as a kid, and I started playing DJ. I had a huge 45 record collection. For those you were younger, 45s are also they're records, basically. They're small. They're small records, and they have a song on each side, and the hit is on one side, and the B side is the other side. So, but I was just obsessed with music and radio, and I wanted to play all the songs on the piano and stuff like that. So, I'm the youngest of three kids. Well, we're adults now. And we're all 3 years apart. And I had my brother was the classic middle child. He was kind of an angry kid. I remember he and I kind of getting along to a certain point. I remember we used to wrestle and stuff. And then came a point where he kind of established dominance, and I kind of became, I want to say I'm afraid of him, but maybe I was afraid of him in a way, and I wanted to impress him no matter what I did. And so whatever my brother said went, and my brother put me down a lot, and I've dealt with this a lot as an adult, but a lot of my negative, impressions about myself kind of go back to that. My brother and I, we get along. My brother called me on my birthday. He calls me every year on my birthday, so he called me on Tuesday and wished me happy birthday. It's a little bit strained of a conversation sometimes, but we find stuff to talk about. And so, that was an interesting relationship growing up. And then my sister was 6 years older than me. So growing up, just kind of a creative, probably odd. I don't know if I was an odd kid. I really can't say what I was, but I was obsessed with radio. I started having an affinity for like Starsky and Hutch and some, guys on TV. I couldn't really figure out what that was all about. That's a 70s reference, but so I kind of knew internally that I was different that way, and grew up and I was just uncomfortable with myself, I think, growing up. I just knew that I was different. And so I made it to junior high, and at that point, all the kids were drinking, experimenting with basically alcohol and marijuana. This would be the early '80s, I guess, for the most part. And so I remember being kind of nervous about drinking, thinking like what would happen to me? I didn't want to lose control. It's just kind of funny to think about that. And so I held off on drinking. Kids started going to concerts. Everybody was going to concerts and drinking and doing all this stuff. And I had a couple of groups of friends. And so one of them, and I'll tell this for John, one of my friends, Pudge, his name was Mark Muldowney. He ended up on the news about 10 years ago in Boston because he tried to hold up a bank or something. He ended up not in a good place. But he was one of my friends, and he had an older brother who was my brother's age, and they had a house party. His parents were away one weekend, and so we decided that was the time that I would drink for my first time. And so Pudge's brother and my brother got us. Now, as far as I remember, it was really just 3 Bud tall boys, and I remember just getting absolutely wasted, blacking out, and waking up in the hallway of Pudge's family's house and thinking it was the best thing ever. So my first time drinking, I blacked out, and it was awesome, and it was my rite of passage. And so I was, off to the races, or whatever, that cliche they get used so much. All bets were off, but I was off. I don't get that one. People say all bets are off, and then they say I'm off to the races. It doesn't make sense. But either way, all bets were off. And so it was every weekend was drinking, and I was kind of part of at least some of the cool kids now in school. And I started going to concerts. That was the big thing at the Boston Garden. My first band was the Cars, which was my favorite band. I'll give you an idea of where I'm at age-wise. And so about a month or two after drinking for the first time, I was introduced to marijuana, and drugs are part of my story, but I honestly think there are very few times in my life where drugs didn't come into the story where there wasn't alcohol in me first. So alcohol is my first love. It is my gateway drug. It's what took me down in the end. And so pot kind of came into the scene, so the cool kids were smoking pot too. We smoked pot and went to concerts. And when I was about 4 years old, just to go back for a minute, my dad bought a house in a place called on an island called Martha's Vineyard, which people know about now, or the Vineyard, as Chris hates when I say the Vineyard. But nobody had heard of it, and it's only like 90 minutes from our house, and you have to take a ferry to get there. And it was like the coolest thing ever. I loved going there. I loved when we got to go there. I spent all my summers there growing up. And so in high school, I was uncomfortable with myself. I don't know where I fit in high school. I really don't know. I had some friends who were kind of jocks. I played soccer for a couple of years. I wasn't that good at it. I didn't like the running. A lot of running in soccer, just it's not worth it. So, and I played tennis too. I played tennis a lot. I didn't play in a team or anything, but those are the sports I liked. And so I one summer, I think it was the summer of like 10th grade, I met all these kids on Martha's Vineyard, and the Vineyard. And they were my partying friends, and they all lived up by the beach. They were kind of wealthy, and they were from Connecticut and New York, and I'm friends with them all to this day. And so that was my first experience on summers drinking. And we had beach parties. If you guys saw the movie Jaws, the way it starts out is with like a beach party, and that was us. That's what I did, except nobody got eaten by a shark, luckily, in real life. But those were my summers growing up, and I am so grateful. I look back, and that's why I just not a fan of summer here in Dallas, because of what I got to grow up with. But just the best times, just the best times of my life. Then I go back to high school, and I'd be like, whatever. So I made it through high school. I should add to my parents, who I love very much. They separated when I was in 7th grade. I remember waking up one night, the whole family was woken up by my parents having an argument, and my mother had basically had an affair. And so it kind of messed up our family dynamic a little bit. My mom moved out, and she lived in a town called Somerville, which was nicknamed Slummerville. So my dad, my dad liked to say that a lot. But basically, my folks kind of split up. I'm trying to. I really can't place what happened what year with them. Me and my sister go back, and we try and think about like their relationship and everything. But anyway, they were, I guess, separated. I think they got divorced by the time I had graduated high school. And I was close to both of them, probably a little closer to my mother. And I was also brought up, I should mention, in a religion called Christian Science, which is not Scientology. People always say that. It's not Science of Mind, it's not Scientology, it's Christian Science. And it's a religion that is based on having complete faith in a higher power, which was a great setup for AA for me. I must say that. But when I say complete faith, I mean like no doctors, nothing medical, no alcohol, no drugs. But that didn't matter. And so my mother would drag us to the church. They had a church in Melrose, in my hometown. And most of my friends growing up were Catholic, so I was kind of the weirdo religion, weird guy out. And I didn't really have any friends who were Christian Scientists. And since I played the piano, I played Sunday school. I was the piano player. I played the hymns and stuff like that, and that kind of comes in later on. The reason I mention that, but I will say that I've always I didn't follow it much beyond high school. My mother kind of forced us into it, and none of my families really followed it. My dad wouldn't go to church on Sunday. He'd be out mowing the lawn, and wouldn't go to church with us. So that was a big part of my growing up, though. I remember going to that church, and I got out of high school, made it out, and ended up going to college out west of Boston, about 2 hours, UMass Amherst, which is a big party school, huge party school. And I ended up in the right place. I landed in one of the biggest party dorms there was. And, first day I got there, had new friends in the hallway. I was drinking. Believe there was a little bit of hash involved. Just to, again, throw that little sprinkle of, whatever on top of my alcohol. So college was just 4 years of partying. I don't think anything tremendously significant happened. I knew that I was gay still. I had growing up too, I should add, I always had girlfriends, but they weren't really girlfriends. Alcohol was good for passing out on women. I'll just tell you that. No offense, but it was. Because it would be like, oh, Birdie. Well, my nickname was Birdie because my last name is Birtwell, and so it'd be like, Birdie has a girlfriend, and I would just, whatever people thought, I would go along with it. So they thought I always had a girlfriend or something. It was crazy. And in college, the party never stopped. I didn't do real well. My first year of college, I got a 1.5 cumulative average. I chose to go to 3 concerts my first finals week of college. I didn't study too much. The Who, Jay Giles, and Rush, just to date myself. And my details, I tried to watch that. And so they wanted me to go to summer school to make it up, and I wasn't going to give up my summer on Martha's Vineyard, so that was off, and so I had to take a semester off from school. And that fall was when I actually worked at a Texaco station in Edgartown, which is on Martha's Vineyard, and I picked up the habit of smoking cigarettes. And I know people still smoke, but I feel like I can say it more freely now that I hated myself for smoking. And it was one of the strongest addictions that I ever felt. And I remember trying to quit early on, and just that physical, just impossibility to quit. So add that to, the drinking and the occasional pot, and then cigarettes. And then the summer of following that year that I didn't do so well in school, my freshman year in college, I was introduced to cocaine, which is always fun. It's a nice little icing on the alcohol cake. Keeps you going. And In college, about 2 years into college, I got a DUI. I was supposed to be the designated driver one night for a bunch of my friends, and so to me that just meant drinking a little less than everybody else. And so sure enough, I was driving a friend of mine's grandmother's Matador, if you know what that is. An old Matador, that Mike Rutstein's grandmother's Matador. I can still see it. It was maroon colored, really ugly car. And Bertie was the designated driver. And we went to an off-campus party and got involved with a quarters game. And some girl was like picking me. And like I said, I didn't think that I was that drunk, but I got in the car and slid. It was snowing out, so I basically slid and somehow slid into another car, got into an accident, and I got a DUI. And this is like 1985 or 6, so things were a little, it was kind of a slap on the wrist. It was a $500 fine that I remember, and I didn't really have the money for that, and I didn't want to ask my dad. So I decided to, with my girlfriend at the time, to sell cocaine in the hallway to pay for my DUI, which didn't go too well because we liked it and we ended up doing it all. So you can imagine that happens. So that wasn't a good idea. And this girl's name was Lydia, woman's I should say, and we're friends to this day. And she tells that in her story as well about trying to sell cocaine to pay for a DUI. So things like that, we laugh about it, but it is, there was nothing wrong with that at the time. It seemed totally normal. I thought we could do it. I don't want to get too much in the drug end of it, but we would do some, and then we would kind of add baby laxative or whatever it was to it to make it, we had reputation as having the worst cocaine in the hallway anyway, so it wasn't good. So things like that just seemed normal, and so got through college. I think I graduated okay. I probably got close to around a 3.0 by the time I graduated, and I was a communications major. I should add, my little obsession with the radio became something I wanted to do with my life, and so I got out of college, didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and at the time I thought I had to go to some little podunk town to be on the radio. It's kind of the way sort of the way it goes. You go to a smaller market. So I went with somebody I know, went to Aspen, Colorado. I should add too, I skied a lot growing up. I skied in New Hampshire and Vermont. I think someplace in Maine, stuff like that. I love skiing. So I went to Aspen, Colorado to be on, and I had a bunch of jobs out there like everybody, a lot of people like me after college not knowing what they wanted to do out in Aspen. And so I got a job at a radio station there. I was the night guy at KSPN, and I had all kinds of just more party stories, just the same lifestyle over and over, just drinking, partying. Same drugs were there involved, but always drinking came first. Made some very good friends there. I knew I still wasn't dealing with my sexuality and the gay thing. I knew that I just had it buried so deep down inside me. And nothing ever happened. I didn't have any experiences, and I was just pretending to be somebody else. And so I made it through a couple of years out there and ended up kind of broke. My dad had given me, I should add, growing up, my father gave me, I think, 3 cars, if not 4, I think 3. And the third car he gave me was a Plymouth Horizon. If you know what these cars are, they're like little square K cars. And I drove that out to Aspen, and I ended up selling that and buying a mountain bike and then using the rest of the money for whatever, partying, I guess. Another thing that he wasn't too happy about it, but another thing that seemed normal at the time to me. So I got through Aspen. I ended up kind of broke out there and came back to Martha's Vineyard where my dad was living. He had retired, and about that time, my mom decided that she wanted our family to be together. She had gotten remarried to this guy that was kind of friends of the family, but he was kind of a I won't say a scumbag, but he kind of was. And so she divorced the scumbag guy, and then my parents got remarried again, which was nice. I don't know. I don't know that my mom was ever in love with my dad, but she loved the idea of the family being together, and so she wanted us to be together. So they were together, and they lived in Martha's Vineyard. So so I come back there, and I'm bored out of my mind on the vineyard. It was fun when I was younger, but I was there for a summer, and I should add to my job, and when I was in college on the island, was driving taxi, and taxi was either like a Woody station wagon or a van, and you drive people around. Half the time you give them tours. They always want to see like Chappaquiddick and stuff like that. And so I had a really cool summer job, and I did that, and this is like 1990 now, and I'm still not dealing with who I am fully. And I get a guy in my cab who is a radio consultant, and I'm working at the radio station on Martha's Vineyard. They have one there. And he's a radio consultant, and he asked me if to send him my stuff, and so I sent him my stuff, and he has a job in Kalamazoo, Michigan. So I don't want to speak too poorly of Kalamazoo, Michigan, but it's just in the middle of nowhere, and it's kind of, they have like a metroplex there. It's Kalamazoo and Battle Creek, which is famous for Kellogg's, I think, yeah, it's Kellogg's cereal. So that's like the big claim to fame out there. And Kalamazoo is a college town. And so I got to the point in Kalamazoo where I was like, okay, listen, I'm gay. I got to deal with this. And so, at the time and I will say that I'm grateful for alcohol at certain times in my life. I don't think I could have gotten through those times. Those summers were the best. I mean, it didn't have any real consequences. The DUI was one, and in 1987 there was an episode where in 1987 I was in jail 3 separate times, but it was I guess those are consequences. I never got a DUI. Just to recap that, I started out 1987 in jail. It was on Martha's Vineyard because I was in a New Year's Eve party, and I wandered away and drinking and probably smoking pot. We had all bought marijuana that night, and we were drinking. And I was freezing cold out, and I somehow walked away from a party. I was obviously in a blackout, and got into someone's car and fell asleep in the back seat. And luckily, the woman, called the cops on me because I could have died out there. It was really cold. So that was my first. It was protective custody. Started out in 1987. Then I was in Atlanta visiting a friend later that year. I took an illegal U-turn without my license on me, and I got thrown in the Huskow there, and whatever county, I'm trying to remember the name. It was a suburb of Atlanta. And then on Labor Day weekend of that year, myself and two of my friends who I was partying with, we all got thrown in jail as well because we had marijuana in the car. They found my bong, and that's a whole other story. I don't want to get too caught up on that stuff. But so in 1987, I did have some consequences, and that was all before. Then I went off to Aspen at that point. So back to 1990. I'm sorry, and I'm in Kalamazoo, and realizing that I have to kind of deal with who I am and all this. So I get up the courage, the liquid courage, and I get in my car, and I remember drinking a 6-pack of Moosehead beer, which I liked for some reason. I was a fan of Canadian beer, and drinking that and driving to Chicago, which was about 2.5 hours away. And Kalamazoo is directly between Chicago and Detroit, so I wanted to go to Chicago, and I went to the gay bars, and I walked into a bar, I think it's still there, called Roscoe's, and I remember just being nervous and having a 6-pack in me, but still just being nervous and waiting for someone to come up to me and whatever not. But I did meet someone. I made a friend that night, and I didn't have a hotel. I didn't have anywhere to stay, so my idea was to stay with somebody anyways. And so I met someone. I went home with this guy, and he was really sweet. And all I remember was from that experience was that it was December. It was the evening of, I think, December 1st. And in Chicago on December 1st, they have a snow removal effect that goes into effect on December the 1st. I came out, my car was gone. And so that was kind of surprising. So he was nice enough to I think, loaned me the money. I did pay him back, but to get my car out of there, and then I had to go back to Kalamazoo, I think, and be on the radio the next day. And I just, about all those times too, I do remember hangovers really well. It is just one thing I certainly don't miss from my drinking days, but I can just remember so many times just feeling like shit. And that was one of them. So I was starting to deal with the being gay thing. And Kalamazoo also has a gay bar in it, believe it or not. And I don't know what it has now. It probably has more. But at the time, they had one that was off in the industrial area of the town. And it was called the Zoo. And it was like the joke of every, all the straight guys, people that I knew would make jokes about it. Oh, you saw you at the zoo and, whatever. And so I got the balls to go to the zoo. And I made a friend there who kind of brought me out into gay life as good as he could in Kalamazoo. So, whatever. But I had a radio job there too. I should add the job I had in Kalamazoo was horrible. I was getting paid $200 a week to work overnights, and it was at a classic rock station. So it was like the same songs over and over and over again. The Carry On Wayward Son and Stairway to Heaven and all this shit just over it. And I would try and change it too on the computer, and it wouldn't let me. I would go so. But I remember meeting some people. I had fans on the radio, and they'd invite me to their house, and they'd have a deer hanging in the garage they were all excited about, and Ted Nugent was their hero and all his stuff. I know. Poor Ted. So I got through all that to a point, and I lasted in Kalamazoo, Michigan for 6 months. And I finally realized that I was gay, and I just didn't want to be there anymore. So I decided to do geographical things. Kind of came into place, and I got in my car, packed up what I had. Oh, and by that point I had bought my own car. I was very proud of myself. I had a Ford Escort. It was red. It had a sunroof. Didn't have a radio in it, so I had a boombox. And I got in that car, and I went to Los Angeles, California. And so I'd been to LA one time before that with my mom on spring break in college. She took me out there to visit a friend of hers, and my sister lived in Utah too. We went to see my sister in Utah. We went skiing, blah, blah, blah. So Los Angeles was exciting to me, exciting and new. And I basically went out there, and I was very gay. I found West Hollywood. I found a boyfriend my first night out at the bars. I had a very good friend from college who I saw when I first got out there, but I remember him saying to me, Elton John had just come out, and so he was like, "Oh, Bertie, I don't know if I can listen to Elton John anymore." And I'm like, my friends I had very homophobic friends, I think, for the most part, and I also stayed with these friends of my mom's. I didn't know anybody out there in the beginning, so I stayed with these Christian Science friends of my mother, who lived out in like the Inland Empire or whatever you call it. And so I just kind of detached myself from those people, and I fell into a lifestyle out there. I was a bartender. I was a temp at Disney for a while. I worked in the Valley at a couple of bars in Studio City in North Hollywood. It was exciting. And I shouldn't, it was just a whole new lifestyle to me. I felt like I could be myself, but I was drinking like crazy. There were the other aforementioned drugs I won't get into that came along with the job. And I was out there though, and I look back and it really was exciting to me. I went through, my first earthquake. Earthquakes are they're not, I don't know. I think there's something everybody should go through. The first one, I just think it's like, because it gives you this feeling of like, what's going on here. And the first one was, I had my own apartment, and there was one out in the desert, and it kind of the ground was going like that. I just thought it was the coolest thing. And then I went through the Rodney King riots, which were incredible. I don't know if anybody else was in Los Angeles during that time, but the city was literally on fire. And I went up to Mulholland, and I looked down, and there were just fires going on all through the city, and there was a curfew. You had to be off the streets by like 8 o'clock. And so I was a bartender. And so I think our bar shut down. This went on for at least a week, if not 2 weeks. And I remember going to San Diego with a friend of mine who was a bartender at this big bar called Rage in West Hollywood, which I don't know if it's still there. I've been there in a few years. So we went to San Diego, and more partying of all sorts happened there. And so Los Angeles, I thought I kind of wanted to be an actor too, but I never never seriously pursued it. I had a few extra things, extra parts, and just got more caught up in the partying. And so, okay, I have to get sober. Yeah. So I told you I get caught up in all these things. So anyways, what happened out of the blue, 1996, we'll get to there. January of 96, I get a phone call from home, and it was hard to reach me by phone. I didn't have a cell phone back then, of course. And it eventually got to me that my mother had passed away out of the blue. She had a heart failure, and she just all of a sudden she died, and she was dependent upon Christian Science at the end. And so she was on the phone with her Christian Science practitioner, and she passed away. So my family kind of think has a resentment against the religion, but that was her wishes. So that brought me back to be with my dad, and I can just whiz through all this. It was nothing really too crazy. I got myself back into radio in Boston, a great radio station just north of Boston, and I got on the air. I had a partner after being up there for a year, and it was a morning guy at a radio station, the radio station in Boston. I loved it. Didn't pay me a whole lot, but I started playing around with a part of radio called imaging, and that got me a job here in Dallas. So I landed here in Dallas in basically January of 2001. So I've been in Dallas since that point. And I got here, and I still was not sober. I will mention my drinking was definitely taking place during the radio job in Boston. I had an incident where I was spoken to by management because I was at a brewery introducing a band, and I was totally shit-faced, and I was swearing in front of kids, and it didn't go well. So they suggested I might want to go to an AA meeting, so I went to one to make them happy, but I was not ready. So I lasted 2 years here. Little bit of drugs in the beginning for me, but otherwise it was just mostly drinking, and this went on for 2 years, and I still had the boyfriend back home, and I'll just say the end of my drinking, especially the end of 2002, was really dark, and I just couldn't stop. It became every day. It went from being in the weekends to being just every day after work. And I had a great job that I moved here for, I should add. And so every day the obsession would set in the afternoon. I would stop at one of 3 different liquor stores, and I would get either beer or vodka or wine. And then I'd go home and smoke pot and drink and smoke cigarettes too. So I knew that wasn't good for me. So I was doing all that, and brings me up to January of 2003, that magical month, and my sobriety date's January 27th, which was, I guess back then would have been a Monday. That was my first full day of sobriety. So on the 26th, early morning of the 26th, I was out and about with a friend of mine who I don't hang out with anymore. All we had in common was drinking. And we were at the bars in Cedar Springs, and I remember just not feeling like I could get drunk. It was it's a very memorable evening for me because I just felt like I couldn't feel like I wanted to feel anymore. And the alcohol felt like it stopped working. But sure enough, I got in my car to drive home, and this friend who's in the car with me, I guess he was going to stay with me or something, this guy Wayne, and I knew Wayne from LA. So we got in the car to drive home, and I lived over in Deep Ellum, and we left the bars, and I drove up Cedar Springs, which becomes Bowen or whatever the street it becomes, and there used to be a Cafe Express on the corner of McKinney Avenue, and so I got to that point, and you could only go left there. And I didn't go left. I went right. And waiting for me coming down the street was a fire truck. And so I drove my car into the fire truck. And I totaled my car. The pictures were incredible. I was known at Lambda for a while. I don't know if I still am as Fire Truck Keith. But that fire truck was coming down the street. And I remember hitting it. And I've seen the pictures, like the damage to my car, and I don't know how I ended up unscathed. And the guy with me in the car, I think he like had a cut in his head or something like that. And all I can remember him was Wayne. He was wasted. He was always drunk, anyways. He was on like seizure medication all the time, so he'd talk like that, anyways. And I just remember him going, the paparazzi, the paparazzi. I'm like, what are you talking about? And so, sure enough, what he meant was there were camera crews out there taking pictures, because it was back then. It was the night before the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl used to be that weekend. So I made the news. I saw it on the news the next day. It was horrible. So. Sure enough, let's just face it. I knew I had a problem, and I remember taking the drunk test, and I remember the cops being really nice to me too. But I just felt this moment of, and I'll never forget that feeling, just this moment of surrender, just going, this is it. I just didn't want to do that anymore. And at the end too, I should add, near the end of my drinking, everything just. It was, I was drinking every day for probably the last 2 or 3 months, literally every day. I reached the point in the mornings, on the weekend, and I think a few weekday mornings where I was making screwdrivers to wake up with. These are all things I said I would never do, and I was doing it. And so my father passed away too, I should add, towards the end of my drinking, and he died in November 2002. And I just got as wasted as I could that night. He was in the hospital, and we had to take him off life support, so I knew that was going to happen, and I just didn't want to deal with anything. So it was time. So what I did was the next full day, my first day of sobriety, I went to a meeting at a place called the Oak Lawn Group, which I think is still there. And I figured that was the gay group or whatever, so I went there, and it's where the Union Coffee Shop is now, a little coffee place. And the people were real nice, and I remember them laughing at me when I asked what a dry drunk was, and we read out of Dr. Bob and the Old Timers, and it was incredibly uncomfortable for me at the beginning. I mean, those first few days, that first week was horrible. I wasn't thrilled, but I kind of went to AA. I got a DUI too, obviously. I woke up in Lew Sterrett after the accident, and I was scared that they were going to find my DUI from college and that I'd be going to like Huntsville or something like that. I had it all in my head. So being so scared, I remember just going to AA. I don't know. I feel like I went to AA proactively, or whatever you want to call it, to keep myself out of trouble. And I did. And I started hearing people just like me, talking just like me, and telling my story. And it was like, it took me a while. I went to Lambda the following Saturday evening. It was a speaker meeting. I remember having my dog in the car at the time and not wanting to talk to people. And it was a speaker, and I sat in the back of the room, and I got out of there as quick as I could. I probably said hi to a couple people. But I still, I was still struggling with it, obviously. I remember that evening after the meeting going to 7-Eleven, and I probably bought cigarettes. I was still smoking, and I just sat in the car wanting to buy a six-pack. And I just remember sitting there wrestling with that, and something just, what I had heard in these rooms kept me from doing that. And I just knew that wasn't going to make me feel any better, and that wasn't the solution at the time. That was my very early sobriety. And so the following week, I went to Lambda again. I went to a noon meeting, and Steve, who's right here, came up to me. He was the first person to come up to me at Lambda. He's now my sponsor, by the way, go figure. And he came up and he goes, I have a friend who needs a sponsee. And so that turned out to be Stephen P. I had to think about who it was for a second, and I haven't seen him in so long. And so, but Stephen became my sponsor, and he was my sponsor for about the first 3 years of my sobriety, and we were very close, and we took trips together. We went to Santa Fe, went to the Provincetown Roundup, and I worked the steps with him, and it was incredible. And I remember, going through the steps the first time, I didn't have a problem figuring out I was powerless over alcohol. What I do with sponsees too, and what I've done with sponsors is just writing down examples of powerlessness and unmanageability. And I had no problem. I had like the longest list in the world of just incident after incident after incident where I was powerless over alcohol. The unmanageability was basically the results of that. And I had no problem with that. When it came to the second step, I had, like I mentioned, the Christian Science thing, because, part of it was another way that I felt like I was odd as a kid, because, none of my other friends went to that church. But the good thing about it was, I mean, it does teach you to have faith. So it's just that the higher power that I had coming in wasn't one that I really wanted to turn my life, my will over to. And in my mind, that God had let my mother die, to be kind of sick about it, but that's kind of what we thought. So that was something that I wrestled with, and what I was able to do is, make that God. It was kind of build a God, I like to say, and have that higher power, what your higher power was, what you want your higher power to be. And so I made that higher power, my friend, and somebody that I, of course, could turn things over to. We went through all that. I dragged my feet on my fourth and fifth step, but I finally got there. I had a fellow, Steven, I had another sponsee that I felt like I was in competition with, because he came in later and he had already done his fourth step and his fifth step. And so I was like, kind of rushed to it. My ego got to me and I said, all right, I'm going to finish this. So I did it that way. And I worked the steps with Steven, and I really love him. I wish I see him more often to this day. But I ended up getting another sponsor a few years after that. And as far as in sobriety, I have been sober for, it is 19 years. So a lot of things have happened in sobriety. In 2008, I was having weird feelings in my chest, and I didn't really know what they were. And I remember going to the hospital on New Year's Eve of 2008. Chris was there, and they said, use less salt or something like that. And they did some tests on me, and they sent me home. And a month after that, I was on an elliptical machine at the gym, and I was having these same feelings. And I passed out. I lost consciousness. And so in reality, I died. My heart stopped, and they had just gotten those paddles at the gym, like whatever you call them, and they shocked me back to life, which is amazing. So I went through that, which was a lot, and they did put stents in me, and I remember people of Darren was there, like in intensive care with these. Yeah, you can probably tell it better than I could, but I woke up with all these friends around me, and they're all people that I know from the program, and the fellowship was just incredible for me at that point. And then I remember the Sunday that happened, I think on a Friday, and I woke up and I had short-term memory, and they were messing with me. Telling me Chris had a partner at the time who, like they had to put a note at the end of the bed saying you've had a heart attack, you're in so and so. So his wise ass partner at the time changes the note, and it says, your name is Louise, the operation was successful. So little things like that, it worked, yeah. And so, but literally every 30 seconds I would forget where I was and what happened. So they were really fucking with me. And then that Sunday night, I remember there being like the room just being people everywhere, and there being like, it sounds like I'm boasting, but there was like a line out the door of people just there to see me. So that really meant a lot to me. And of course I stayed sober through all that. 3 years later, they put like stents in me, and those didn't really take, I guess, or something. So I developed, they put a machine in me that I have a defibrillator thing inside me that shocks me if my heart stops or if it goes too fast. And so after that, about a year after all that happened, my heart started getting this rhythm where it goes too fast. And so this thing, I don't know if anybody here has one of these inside, but it's like being kicked from the inside. And so it started going off, and I was in a lot of anxiety. There were definitely a few times where I was wanting a drink through that. But they finally did a procedure on that as well to fix that. And I also had open heart surgery in 2011. They did a triple bypass on me. So I went through a lot of stuff. This all happened, at this point now, 11 years ago. But I came through it. I had to go through like taking painkillers and doing that responsibly, which can be a challenge in sobriety. I had people watch it for me, and I woke up after oh my God, you wake up out of heart surgery and you're on every like turbo painkiller in the world. But I made it through that. I've made it through, I've had a few relationships along the way. Those of you guys who know me, And breakups are not easy. I've made it through those without having to drink. I've had some financial difficulties. Actually, while the heart stuff was going on, kind of that all hit me at once too. I've had difficulties on that end. And how much time I have here? I got to shut up in a second. So trying to think of all the crappy stuff I've been through in sobriety. There's just been a lot of challenges. I think the health thing is a big one. I won't get too into the financial end of things, but when my father passed away, I kind of spent my way through early sobriety. So we'll just say that it's what we do, and I've had to live where I don't, we shall not regret the past, or wish to shut the door on it, whatever. I've had to deal with that promise, and that really has come true, because in sponsoring people, I've been able to help people who've going through the same thing. So I'm here today. I'm grateful for that. My life isn't perfect today, but it's I don't have to drink. I don't have to pick up a drink to deal with it, and that to me is the most important thing of all of this. I wanted to leave here giving people hope. Hopefully I've done that. I'm trying to think what else I can add to everything. I'm just really grateful to be sober today, and I am grateful that I know what to do. I met with my sponsor yesterday, and I said, I don't feel like my life is like, I want to be inspiring to people. I feel like my life is, I don't know, I'm kind of struggling right now in some areas, but I can't imagine not having this program in there to tell me what to do right now. And getting up here and sharing that with you guys is part of that too. So I'm not perfect. I haven't worked AA perfectly, but I've worked these steps. And as far as I know, the only step we have to get 100% is the first one. So that's probably the best advice I could give to anybody. The rest of them, the second one is making your own higher power is what you want. And I think I'm kind of rambling, so I'm probably going to shut up. I really appreciate getting to speak and being asked to speak here. And that's all I have. Thank you.